Hello and welcome to a little tutorial on how to pick a good question for your Literature NEA. So just before we kind of plough on with do's and don'ts, if you will, of the NEA, a little reminder of the lenses and the theories that you've encountered this year and the things that you could think about when you're writing about Beloved. So we've done narrative theory, feminist theory, Marxism, eco-criticism, post-colonialism, and this idea of literary value and the canon. So it might be useful just before you plough on any further to think about which one you found the most useful and why. Which one do you think kind of gave rise to your best ideas? Okay, so what I'm about to show you then is what the exam board have basically recommended in their report about coursework. So two things that they mentioned that I want to pull out for you are what they said the best NEAs did. So firstly, which we've kind of talked about quite a lot now, the best NEAs avoided applying an obvious set of critical ideas to a text because then debate, exploration, and counter-argument became difficult. So doing a feminist reading of a feminist text isn't going to allow you to debate things in much detail. Okay, so if this is quite clearly a feminist text, then why are you bothering to debate it? Yeah, that's the kind of argument the exam board will make. So that is why we're probably steering clear from a truly post-colonial lens, even though the things that you thought about in terms of things like narrative gaps in literary tradition could totally be things that you write about, but maybe from like a narrative lens or maybe a cultural value one. The second thing that the exam board said the best NEAs did was show that the students really understood the critical ideas they were working with and used them as a lens through which to read the literary text rather than just writing about the text in isolation and then tagging on critical ideas at the end. So basically, if you pick a narratological lens where you're really going to focus on structure, that needs to be thread throughout your whole essay, and you need to really read Beloved from a narrative perspective. Equally, if you're going to do a Marxist reading of it, your whole reading and understanding of that message from that novel needs to be from a Marxist standpoint. Okay, you can't be like, oh, wasn't this really interesting? A Marxist might say this and just leave it at that. Yeah, it needs to be your whole kind of angle, if you will. Yeah, it's reading that text from a certain position. Either you're a narrative critic or you're a post-colonial critic, you're a feminist critic, you're reading the whole thing, every bit of evidence that you use, everything that you talk about, every feature, every device, what kind of lens are you bringing to it? And it needs to be that same consistent lens all the way throughout your essay. So this is what examiners are looking for you to do. Okay, these are the do's of the NEA. They want a line of argument where you reach a conclusion, and you are going to have to know that conclusion before you start, guys. Okay, so before you write your final draft, you should know where you're going to end up. I absolutely do not think you will necessarily know your conclusion on your first draft. Okay, normally your best ideas come while you write. Okay, so while you're digesting, while you're analysing your quotes, that's when you come up with your best ideas. And only when you've done your first draft and you sit back from it, you think, oh, this is what I'm getting at. This is where I'm heading. Okay, so don't feel like you need a conclusion for your first draft. But by that final draft, you should know so clearly what you're going to arrive at that we can see those little kind of breadcrumbs all the way through. So clear line of argument and a clear conclusion. They want you to genuinely debate and explore different ideas about the text. So they do want you to consider it from multiple interpretations, for all it might be the one lens, but they do want you to ultimately come down to one decision about the way that you think it should be read and why. Okay. And finally, just to remind you that you are meant to write 1,250 words or maybe 1,500 words that excludes quotes. Okay, so that means quotes from the novel, but also quotes from critics. I think you will be, I don't know whether to say pleasantly surprised or mortified by how quickly that word count gets eaten up, guys. I know from the volume of notes that you guys have been making, from the depth of the essay plans that I've read, that you guys are easily going to hit this 1,500 word count. And I think the biggest struggle most of us are going to have is really trimming it right back and just sticking with our best ideas. So with that in mind, I think less is more. Yeah. So do things in a lot of depth and a lot of detail, but do fewer things. So this bit in purple then is an example question that you might arrive at that achieves these things that the examiners are looking for. Morrison has written Beloved in such a way that it is impossible to sympathise with any of the white characters as there's so little to redeem them. Using ideas from the critical anthology to inform your argument, to what extent do you agree with this view? So that second sentence, the bit that has a question mark on the end, is pretty much going to go on the end of most questions, okay? If you're doing a kind of quote setup or something that you're going to debate, a statement to debate, you can pretty much copy and paste that last sentence, okay? I'm going to talk you through different types of questions. I'm also going to email you, having read your work, which question I think you'd be best suited to and why, and basically kind of how I would use your essay plans and the ideas that you've shown me to fit that question type. So, according to the exam board, the best questions are like the ones on the exam because they're framed around AO5, okay, that debate and exploration. So the NEA should help you do that debate that's such a big assessment objective. The two main ways to frame the task then are to ask a genuine open question. How does Morrison present, I don't know, the idea of dehumanization in Beloved? Or give a viewpoint about a literary text and then ask you to debate it. So very similar to this one, this purple one, give a viewpoint, to what extent do you agree? Okay, they're the two easiest ways to do it. What you need to avoid are tasks which simply invite you to describe or explain, okay, because they are very low level skills. What you need to be doing is analysing, evaluating, debating, thinking about it from multiple perspectives and coming to a conclusion after a lot of detailed analysis. Yeah, so anything like explain how Denver develops as the novel progresses. Boring. Yeah, you're telling a story, you're just narrating, you're not doing any of the analysis. Okay. So here are the three main question types. So when I've sent you your feedback, these are the three questions that I'm referring to. Okay, so I've told you which number and which colour I think your essay plans seem to be kind of channeled towards. So the first type, which is just beautiful and it works for absolutely every student. Okay, so if you are struggling, here's your starting point. It's literally explore the significance of. Okay, so you pick a different idea, a theme, or maybe a feature and think about what meanings are raised from that idea. So it might be explore the significance of the motif of milk in Beloved. Explore the significance of nature imagery in Beloved. Explore the significance of Paul D in Beloved. Okay, it can be literally anything. So often this works really well with a narrative lens, but often just kind of is what you've been talking about your whole literary careers, okay? So if you're going to talk about a certain idea or a certain device that an author uses, then this is the way to frame it, okay? So you don't even have to have some kind of quote that you want to debate. Now, to get the AO5 in type 1 questions, it means you have to say, well, actually, the significance of milk might be this, but maybe it's this. Here's what I think overall. Or some people might read Paul D like this because some other readers have seen Paul D like this. Look at what this critic thinks, totally different. Here's what I think of Paul D. Okay, so you need to make sure that you've got that debate, even though you need a nice clear line of argument. All right, so different interpretations of whatever the feature is that you want to focus on. That's question type 1. Question type 2 is that quote and to what extent do you agree? So you could take a quote from the anthology. Okay, so lots of these PowerPoints that we've been working from recently and lots of stuff that you've highlighted and lots of your preparation for those lessons where you've linked 5 quotes to the novel, that's the kind of material that would be really useful here. Okay, so if it talks about, you know, the beginning, openings of novels being the threshold between reality and that kind of fictive world, for example, we've talked a lot about that quote, haven't you? To what extent do you agree? You could write a whole essay on how far you think that bears out in the opening of Beloved. Okay, so a quote from the anthology, look back through what you've highlighted, look back through all the PowerPoints and all your notes and the things that you really thought linked to Beloved, and you could debate that. What we're looking for is a really high level debate with lots of nuance. So, well, I agree with that bit of the quote, but this bit of the quote doesn't really bear out. The next video that I'm going to record for you, which tells you how to plan, shows you how to get that nuance in, okay? So it's really important that you watch that next video once you finish with this one. So to what extent do you agree means that you might not necessarily agree with the whole quote, okay? There might be parts that you agree with, parts that you disagree with, parts that you're a bit like ambivalent about and you want to debate, okay? So make sure you're getting that AO5 in there, that debate. The third and perhaps most challenging would be to find your own quote from other critics or from reviews of the novel. Okay, so in the past I have sent you a post-colonial article, like a chapter from the PhD, didn't I? I'm going to use that in my plan video to show you how you could adapt a quote from a critic and use it as a question. But you might have your own reasons. So I've encouraged a lot of you to use JSTOR while it's free. Oh my God, we're so lucky. And you could have found an amazing quote that you thought was such a brilliant idea. And it could be an amazing quote because you really disagree with it. Actually, you could think, God, that is so wrong. Here's everything I would use to disagree with that. So just because it's in an anthology or just because it's in a peer-reviewed journal doesn't mean that you can't disagree with it. Okay, so you might have found a quote from your wider reading that you want to kind of set up like a type 2 question. So a quote, to what extent do you agree? So don't forget that will also need that nuance where you look at individual words in it and think, yeah, I agree with that bit, but I don't really agree with that bit. Okay, so 3 different question types. As I say, if you've sent me essay plans, I've told you where your essay plans seem to be falling in terms of these 3 types. And these are the things that the NEA should not include, okay? So I've given you a list of do's and things that we would like to see. This is what we don't want to see. So work that is not your own. That means if you have read Cliff's Notes and thought, God, that was a good idea, you don't just rip it off and put it in your own essay, okay? You need to be very, very careful that these are your own ideas. By all means, read widely, but you need to make sure that you're citing where you got ideas from if they're not yours. So with that in mind, do not lend your work to other students, okay? You shouldn't be circulating your coursework. You shouldn't be sharing your ideas and, rewriting people's paragraphs for them. You shouldn't therefore allow other students access to or use of your own independently sourced source material. So if you know, for example, that somebody else is doing a Marxist essay and you come across a Mint essay, please don't then email them it, okay? This needs to be your own research because you're going to get marked for how well you're using that research, okay? So for finding it for yourself. Include work that's been copied directly from books, the internet, or other sources without acknowledgement. Okay, so whatever you read for your coursework, you should be making meticulous notes in terms of where you got that idea from. Okay, do not pass something off as your own idea if it's not. Don't submit work that is word processed by a third person without acknowledging that. I don't think that's going to apply to anybody here, but that's in the rules. I didn't want you to be shocked by that. Don't include inappropriate, offensive, or obscene material if you can at all help it, although parts of the novel might fall into all 3 of those categories. So this is how you might generate your ideas in terms of what you want to focus on, or in terms of what your quote might be for your question. Now, I can't stress this enough, you always have to start with a novel, okay? You can't do anything unless that evidence is in that text, okay? You need to start with a book. So the way that I always start planning an essay is by looking back through the novel and literally writing out anything that I've highlighted that seems to be on the topic that I want to focus on. So if I know that I vaguely want to be in the kind of, the area of motherhood or nature, I would literally write down every quote or every part or every page number or maybe every character that links to that theme, and I would collect them all together. Okay, so you're looking for moments, quotes, features, so it might be like structural elements, for example, that you think are going to be useful. So use the novel first. That is your starting point, and it should take you quite a while. Then you might want to go to your class notes and the PowerPoints and videos that you've been using in recent lessons. Then you might want to look at A-level standard stuff. So like Cliff's Notes and Spark Notes that I've been directing you to recently. You might have a copy of York Notes that's like a textbook, or you might want to order things like this. So these are the recommendations for your level of study. Then the critical anthology, so look back through the quotes and ideas that you think might help shape your argument. So anything that you've highlighted, anything that you have linked as your homework that you think went really well with the novel on that topic. Then look for some quotes from our author. Okay, so Google her and your topics. You might put in Morrison on motherhood. Use YouTube to see if there's any interviews that you could cite. I've also attached an essay. It's really short and really good to the email that I sent you today with this PowerPoint on. So make sure you've had a little read of that because she's talking about the book and you can't get better than that. And then finally, wider reading. So quotes from critics. So look for JSTOR, as I've said, or just Google the novel and your topic and see what clever people have said about it. Okay, Google Books or Google Scholar will help you with that. So top tips then for your question. The shorter the question, the easier your job. Okay, so it's much easier to keep that tight focus if you're focusing on something small. If the quote's too long, it might get unwieldy. There might be too many things to debate, okay, and you might kind of get beyond that word count. So you can always select part of a sentence from a critic or just cut parts out using square brackets. Okay, so the shorter the better. That's everything you need to know about picking your question. You need to watch the next video now, which is about how you're going to plan your first draft. Very exciting.